Hey guys, what is up? It is SSD Middleman here with Guides for Us All, and today we're going to be checking out all of the Reaper weapons in Dark Souls 2. If there's a certain one you want to skip to, make sure to click it on the screen, and let's get started with the Crescent Sickle. You can get this by achieving rank 2 in the Brotherhood of Blood, or by getting to New Game Plus 2 and trading Chancellor Wellier 10,000 souls for this weapon. Now, this weapon is pretty solid actually. At plus 10 you'll be doing 180 base damage with 120 magic damage, an E scaling in strength, and a C scaling in both dexterity and sorcery damage. Making this weapon deals a fair amount of damage. I don't think it's too bad, especially if you have higher magic skills. The magic damage with like 50 intelligence will be plus 122 with that original 184, so it's pretty crazy how much magic damage you can do with this with high intelligence, since the base magic damage is pretty high. Unfortunately, on the character I'm using it on right now, I do not have very high intelligence at all, so the weapon might not seem as good as it actually is. But yeah, there's really not much to say about this weapon, so let's move on to the Great Scythe, which you can get from either Tichigren in the Undead Purgatory or by killing those Seldora spiders. It's a really rare drop from them though, so I recommend just buying it from Tichigren. Now, once you get this weapon, this is the first of the scythes that the first of the Reapers that actually has like a big stick with one blade on at the end, which is the Scythe. And it is very hard to actually hit enemies for the full effect of these kinds of damages. You have to hit them with the blade. If you hit them with the wooden handle part of it, it will deal half or 1/3 of the regular damage, which really sucks, to be honest. I'm not going to sugarcoat it at all. The damage is horrendous if you do not hit it with the blade. So using these kinds of weapons will require a lot of practice and use before you're able to use it efficiently. Now, at plus 10, you'll be doing 260 base damage with an E scaling in strength and an A scaling in dexterity, which leads to some pretty solid damage, or attack output damage with this. And unfortunately, unlike the one in Dark Souls 1, this one does not cause any bleed buildup. It's just a pretty decently solid damaging weapon. Anyways, let's move on to the Silverback Sickle, which you can get from the Grave Wardens in the Undead Crypt by Grave Warden Agdane. Now, do note, you can kill these Grave Wardens without actually making Agdane aggro against you. So just walk up there, start killing the ones that have the sickle, and if you're lucky, they will drop this. Now, this weapon at plus 10 will be doing 160 base damage with 105 dark damage, a C scaling in both strength, dexterity, and as well as the dark damage category. This is an interesting weapon, very interesting. I actually didn't know it existed because I never thought to kill the Grave Wardens next to Agdane. And this weapon is interesting in the fact that it does not have a Reaper moveset. It actually uses the Hand Axe moveset, which is very interesting. But yeah, it does deal dark damage, so the higher your faith and intelligence are, the higher damage you'll be dealing with this bad boy. In my opinion, it's not too special. It's a pretty solid weapon, but there are some other Reapers that I enjoy using a little bit more. Anyways, let's move on to the Great Machete, which you can get from the big enemies. I don't even know their name. In the Lost Bastille, they wield the Great Machete, and they walk around. There's about 3 of them. If you walk outside of Macduff's workshop, or that bonfire you get to by taking the Eagle, you'll be able to just kill these 3 guys, and it is a pretty rare drop to get it from them. It took me quite a long time just to get it from these guys farming. But at plus 10, you'll be doing 250 base damage with a B scaling in strength and a D scaling in dexterity. Very solid base damage, and once you level up your strength and dexterity, you'll have even better. I mean, it's not incredible because of the fact that it has no added effects. 250 base damage with B scaling isn't too bad. You'll be doing just over 300 damage, but like the Scythe, if you do not hit with the blade of this weapon, you'll be dealing greatly reduced damage to your enemy, making it just abysmal if you do not learn how to use this. Now, this weapon actually has a different two-handed R1 attack. It actually has a wide sweep, which you can see the large machete wielders in the Lost Bastille using against you. It is a pretty good sweeping attack, nice to landing enemies, and then it goes back into the regular pulling reap attack when you press R1 again for that second piece of the combo. But the Great Machete is a pretty solid weapon overall, nothing too special about it. So we'll move on to the Full Moon Sickle, which you can get from the Artificial Undead wielding the Crescent Sickles. You can find a ton of these guys if you go to the Mines bonfire, and then head around here to where I'm going. Take a right at this path, and there will be like 6 or 7 of them, including a Red Phantom if you are on New Game Plus. Now, this weapon is absolutely fantastic, and you will see why in just one moment. At plus 10, you'll be dealing 270 base damage with a D scaling in strength and a B scaling in dexterity, but it does have a built-in bleed effect. Now, what's so amazing about this bleed effect is it deals 160 bleed damage per hit. 160. That's insane. That's without bleed infusion, without any buffs, straight up 160 bleed damage. Now obviously you can wear the Shadow Gauntlets, the Crest of Blood, and dual wield these guys that both have bleed. It will actually allow you to instantly inflict bleed with a single power stance strong attack. One attack, full bleed meter. Insane. This weapon actually gives the most base bleed damage in the entire game. Yeah, I definitely recommend infusing this with a bleed stone. You can piss people off a lot in PvP by using the Full Moon Sickle. It is absurdly powerful. Now you cannot coat it in bleeding serum, even before you infuse it with a bleed stone. You can't coat it with bleeding serum, and you know, this weapon swings actually pretty slow since it is a Reaper weapon, and it's kind of hard to hit enemies with this. I forgot to mention this about the Reapers before, but it is a little bit harder to actually nail your enemies with the Reaper weapons, even with these smaller sickles, because they do swing quite slow compared to some of the other weapons. But this Full Moon Sickle, I definitely recommend giving it a shot. With 270 base damage, the descaling in strength, the B in dexterity, and the bleed damage added onto it, makes this weapon absolutely solid choice for any build. And now moving on to the Scythe of Gnar Elma, which you can buy from Merchant Hag Malentia after you kill Tichigren in the Undead Purgatory. This is the only way to get it. Unfortunately, you do have to kill Tichigren to get this weapon. Now, at +5, this is upgraded with Twinkling Titanite. You will be dealing 140 base damage with 100 dark damage, a D scaling in strength, a B scaling in dexterity, and a C scaling in dark. Now this weapon is pretty interesting because of all the effects it has on it and the likeness. I don't know, you can infuse this weapon with dark and then even cast dark weapon on it to further increase the dark damage, so it's actually pretty good for a hex based build because of how much dark power damage you can actually throw onto this weapon. But like the other scythes, you do have to nail your enemy right with that tip of the actual blade to deal your full damage. Not a terrible weapon, like I said in the gameplay, though. This character I'm playing with does not have very high intelligence or faith, so you won't really be able to see the full output of this weapon in this video. I'm sure there are other videos of people using the Scythe of Gnar Elma and putting it to better use than I did. Anyways, let's move on to the Bone Scythe, which you can get by trading the Covetous Demon Soul to Straight of Alaphus. And the Bone Scythe is pretty much the most basic scythe in the entire game. If you're sick of all these silly effects and you just want a nice base damage beast, the Bone Scythe is for you. It deals 280 base damage with a B scaling in strength, and that's it. That's it. That's the entire weapon. Nothing really special about that, except for the fact that you can actually infuse it with anything and it will give you a B scaling in that regard as well. So this weapon is actually great for infusion. Let's say you infuse it with magic, you will keep that B scaling in strength, and you will have an added B scaling in magic. And the base damage does suffer quite a bit, though. It will go down to 196 from the 280, but depending on what level your intelligence or your faith skills are, this can actually add way more damage, because it also gives 196 to the other effects, such as magic or fire or lightning, whatever. This could make the weapon absurdly powerful, and that's a pretty nice special effect on this, that it does not lose any scaling with the upgrade. And now moving on to the Scythe of Want, which you can get from Weaponsmith Ornifex by trading her the Soul of Nashandra. Now you upgrade this with Petrified Dragonbone, and at +5 you will be dealing 260 base damage with a 200 damage in dark, a D scaling in strength, B scaling in dexterity, and a C scaling in dark. Some pretty nice damage output, and I know exactly what you're thinking about infusing this weapon with dark, but unfortunately this weapon cannot be infused or enchanted at all, which is really unfortunate. This weapon could have had so much potential if infusion was allowed on it, but unfortunately the Scythe of Want is what you get. That's all you get when you get this weapon. You get the one scythe, and you do have to trade the Soul of Nashandra, which isn't really that big of a deal since you could fight her again with a bonfire ascetic, but god do I hate watching the credits. Anyways, this does seem to have a smaller reach than most of the other scythe weapons. You got to get a little more up close and personal, which could make it easier for some of you to hit with the blade. I do know it was easier for me to hit with the blade since it was a shorter weapon. It was more simple to judge the distance between you and the enemy that you needed to smack him with this bad boy. And this actually highly resembles a nameless scythe that was wielded by Rurafon in Shadow Tower Abyss, which was an earlier title from Software. But despite that resemblance, it is a completely new design. It's not the exact same thing, so take that with what you will. Anyways, let's move on to the last but not least of the Reaper weapons, the Scythe of the Forlorn. You can only get this weapon in the Scholar of the First Sin edition of Dark Souls 2, and you have to get it by killing the Forlorn enemies 4 times and then killing one of the Forlorn invaders that comes in with a Scythe. I might make a guide in the future as to how to fight these guys more easily, but until then you can probably find a decent text guide online as to where these guys spawn. It's pretty random with a few guaranteed spawn spots. Anyways, this weapon is upgraded with Twinkling Titanite, and at +5 you'll be doing 210 base damage with 70 dark damage, a D scaling in strength, an A scaling in dexterity, and a C scaling in dark. Although this weapon also deals 140 bleed damage. This thing is just all over the board, across the board. It's got everything. It's got base damage, dark damage, scaling in strength, dexterity, and dark, and bleed damage. So you can do a lot of things with this weapon. It does scale with hollowing though, which is pretty interesting. It's like the Dark Pyromancy Flame and the Greatsword of the Forlorn. You actually want to become as hollowed as possible if you want to be dealing the maximum amount of damage with this weapon, which could be kind of a pain in the butt with the halved health bar, but this weapon does a ton more damage when you're hollowed. And you must also note that this weapon probably performs best when you infuse it with bleed. It doesn't really lose that much damage when you infuse it, and the bleed will go up to 235, which is almost a 100 bleed damage increase, and you could just smash people with that. It's also pretty good with dark. Like I said, since it does benefit so much from infusion, the dark damage will go up. There's not much else to say about this weapon. Remember, you can only get it in the Scholar of the First Sin edition, so if you've been running around Dark Souls 2 trying to get it, you're not going to be able to. Anyways, thanks for watching the video, guys. If you enjoyed, please leave a like rating down below and subscribe to see some more videos in the future, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.